I'm an educator. I've taught both Russian as well as engineering. And in education, talking about scalability, one of the things I noticed in robotics competitions, which drew a lot of different students, and when I say students, I mean that in the very, very general terms of both like high school students and middle school students and college students, as well as that guy in the garage who has a day job and he's a student of life, you know, and he wanted to build better robots. And so what I would notice is that if these people over here who made sumo robots, which are autonomous robots that can find each other in a small ring, instead of two big fat guys pushing each other out of the ring, you have two skinny little robots pushing each other out of the ring. But it's all autonomous, so you have to program it. And they'd be very good at sensor-based technology. How do you find the other robot, and how do you find the edge of the arena? But they wouldn't be very good mechanical engineers. I mean, the robots themselves were not very durable. If you go to BattleBots and Robot Wars type competitions, you'd have these people who would be extremely good. I'm just going to run some background slides. Are we hot? It's doing it again. I'll have to reboot, sorry, but I'm just going to show you some pictures in the background while I talk. And so the BattleBots guys were brilliant mechanical engineers, and I mean, these are robots that you know, you could use as cars because they were so good at impact. You know, you could smash into them and they'd survive, you know, and there's a lot of good mechanical engineering technology in that. But they didn't use any sensors or artificial intelligence for the most part. Some of them did. And then you deal with like a lot of the college competitions like RoboCup, in which they were very, very brilliant CS students, very good at designing artificial intelligence. But they would buy their robots, mostly from Sony, and program them. If the robot didn't work, not programmatically, but you know, the servo blew up or something, they'd be like, and ship them off. And so we would go around and tell people, you know, like, you really need to go to this other competition because you'd be so much better at what you do. You know, much like if you're a sculptor, you can become a better sculptor by painting for a while because you start to look at the world a little bit differently. And then you go back to sculpting and you find you're a better sculptor. And so basically, in terms of scalability, we do these small little events at the Exploratorium, which is this wonderful museum in San Francisco, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually they were too big for that. And when we were looking for new venues, one of the things we realized is like, well, you know, let's stop just doing these individual events of just sumo or just small size stuff, and let's pool everybody together because nobody is listening to me about going to the other events. And so in 2004, we did the first ROBOlympics, which attracted people from, I think the first event was 19 different countries in about 40 or 50 different disciplines. And the real goal there was to get them to talk to each other. And you know, sort of talking to Deborah's point earlier about these Korean learning teachers who now are like rock stars. RoboGames has grown to the point where, and the Olympic Committee sues everybody who uses the words Olympics, so we're no longer RoboLympics, we're now RoboGames. But we now actually have our own trading cards. And it's really cool when we do events, and you guys can pass these around, that we have our trading cards with the robot on the front, and then on the back it's the people who built the robot. And then there's flags for the country, so you know, if you're from India or the US or Brazil or whatever. And you guys can sort of pass these around while I talk. But what was really interesting, and has become interesting about RoboGames, is it's starting to work, is that cross-pollination is really working to the point where one of, I think, the biggest success stories is that we introduced humanoid robotics to the United States on a small scale. For those of you who follow robotics, even in a generalized sense, Honda built the Asimo robot, which is a walking robot, which was sort of considered an impossible feat many, many years ago. And because of that, let's see here. So these are just generalized picture from various RoboGames events. But because of that, other people said, hey, maybe it's not impossible. And they started building humanoid robots in their garages with hobby servos for $1,000 that could actually walk and do kung fu and things like that. And after the first RoboGames, we actually flew a whole bunch of people in from Japan to just compete in the humanoid android stuff. And all of these Americans were like, hey, you know, I can do that. And maybe I can build something like that. And so that cross-pollination really started to work in terms of the different people coming to different things. And when we started out in a very small space, and I'm trying to keep it somewhat topical to scaling. I mean, I could talk about RoboGames for 3 days. And one of the things we found is that it does actually scale very well in terms of us being able to get people now. It's really interesting how much it's grown is that when we started out, the wonders of the internet was really the way we got all of our original contestants. We get on listservs and find people on the web and email them and beg them to come and things like that. And now it's grown to the point where we get random emails from people all over the world. My wife got an email from Islamabad a few days ago of some contestants from Pakistan who are like, hey, we want to come. We need, you know, visa invitations and things like that. And they're really coming from all over. And what's interesting is that cross-pollination isn't limited to different disciplines, but it's also really inspiring people from all sorts of different age groups. It's really cool when we get kids. Actually, this is a very important picture. The little guy there, his name's Tony Pratt-Canis. The first RoboGames, I think he was probably 12 or 13. I know he's 17 now. We have 10 different events just for kids. So if you're a kid, and when I say kid, I mean 17 or younger, you can come and compete absolutely for free. But you can also compete against adults if you choose to do so as a kid. Well, Tony competes in an event called firefighting robots. And what firefighting robots are is they're an autonomous robot. The goal being that 5 years down the line from now, this will be a very big consumer product, much like you have robot vacuum cleaners today. Firefighting robots will basically be the cross between a robot vacuum cleaner, a fire extinguisher, and a smoke detector. And basically, it just sits in the corner, ideally, and does nothing for your whole life unless there's a house fire. And the goal, the real engineering principle, is that if there's that house fire, before the fire department needs to put out your whole house, which is now engulfed in flames, the firefighting robot detects the fire, runs over, and puts the fire out while it's just still a small fire. Some of the technological problems there are that, you know, we like fireplaces and we like candles on our table, so it's not as easy as a challenge as you might think. But in terms of trying to inspire students, so Tony, who interestingly enough or not, is a homeschool student, Tony came to compete in 2005 for his first year in firefighting against mostly professional engineers. These are mostly guys in their 40s or 50s who are professional computer scientists, programmers, professional robotic engineers, and they're all laughing at the cute little kid who's going to compete against them. Well, Tony, of course, wins the gold medal. You know, and it's not even like a close win. I mean, I kind of refer to Tony as the Michael Phelps of robotics. So then the next year, 2006, comes along, and he's actually really forced these professional 40, 50-year-old engineers to build better robots. They're like, okay, you know, we're going to walk in and take our gold medal and go away, and like, oh, shoot, we're going to have to work harder. Well, Tony, you know, who's a high school, middle school kid who has nothing better to do, just works on his robot all the time, comes in 2006, beats all the professional engineers again. So now the professional engineers are really going to piss off this little kid. And they come back in 2007, and Tony spanks him again. 2008, Tony spanks him again. 4 years in a row, Tony gets the gold medal. I'm really belittling the professional engineers. Two of them who own a multi-million-dollar company called O-Logic, Bob and Ted. I'm like, so are you guys, you know, going to come close to Tony this year? You know, I mean, I know you're not going to get gold, you're going to get silver. Well, so in 2009, this previous summer, Tony finally lost. And this is actually one of the best stories that's come out of our event, is that Tony lost to some Indonesians who barely had enough money to fly in. They flew in, they actually stayed at the youth hostel next to Fort Mason where we do the event because they couldn't afford a regular hotel. Two Indonesian kids, they come in and they win gold medal. Well, what's really cool is talking about, to Deborah's point about rock stars, when they fly back to Indonesia, they're met at the airport by the Minister of Education. They get a reception. They later meet the president of Indonesia in a formal reception. The actual president, I'm not talking about the president of their university, I'm talking about the president of Indonesia, who then gives both of them full boat scholarships through postdoc work. They're both undergrads right now, so they're paid for. This same year, the gold medal teams from Mexico who won in sumo competitions and actually beat some of the Japanese and Singapore contestants who typically are always the gold medal winners. were met by Felipe Calderón, president of Mexico, and also given scholarship. So I think those slides are in here somewhere. That's actually the Brazilian teams who come and actually do very well. Am I on for time? So in terms of scaling your events, whether it's education or robots or things, there's always a lot of room for cross-pollination and really inspiring people to do whatever it is. I mean, this event could just as easily be dedicated to earth sciences or music or anything else. And I really think that competitions like this help to inspire much more so than typical classroom events. And I think Tony Pritkanis, the formerly 12-year-old boy, I guess he's 17 now, is a really good example of that. Is even he was inspiring the 40 and 50-year-old professional engineers to do better. And I think it's important. I'm one of those old-fashioned guys who doesn't want to get rid of the grading system in terms of people who want to say, okay, no more grades in high school and things like that. Mostly because I think, and I see from RoboGames, that when you get the silver medal or you get the bronze medal, it's really cool. But the next year, you really want the gold medal, and you're really going to work forward to that. The Indonesians are coming back now, and it's really cool. The second year, I think we had 2 Brazilians who literally slept on my wife and I's couch when they came for the event. And they slept on the couch, and that's, you know, and all their stuff was at our house, and we'd shuttle them back and forth every day. The next year, we had like, I think 4 or 5 Brazilians, and now we have this huge contingent of like 40 or 50 Brazilians who throw these wild parties, and they literally plan their school year around RoboGames. It's literally, they have to get, because the event typically happens during finals week, so they actually have to get change of finals papers from their, they either take them before they leave or after they come back and things like this. And now the Indonesians, apparently several universities are sending huge contingents again, and it's really getting to that point where, what we intended 5 years ago has actually worked. And an interesting side effect of this is we're now recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as being the world's largest robot competition. And it's kind of funny how that happened is that you can get in the Guinness Book of World Records for 2 reasons. Two different ways. Number one is you contact Guinness in advance of whatever it is you're doing, whether you're going to be the #1 bean eater on the planet or robot builder or whatever. And you fill out all these long papers, and they have these designated people. Or they find you, and they want new events or new categories. And so because of our photo archive on the website, we actually get press requests all the time for robot photos. They just need a robot photo for whatever. So Guinness contacts me one day and says, hey, we want to use this photo on your website. Is that okay? And we actually use Creative Commons, and we're very cool with like anybody can use anything as long as the photographer is credited. And I'm like, sure, no problem. Are you guys doing a new section on robots or whatever? And she's like, oh, no, this is for your entry. I didn't know we had an entry. She's like, oh, yeah. And this was the 2007 edition. She's like, we're now recognizing you as the world's greatest robot competition. I'm like, cool. So in terms of scalability, I think one of the ways that you can scale really well is to not try. Is that when Simone and I started this, we didn't try to become the world's biggest event. We didn't try to get scholarships for Indonesian students. We didn't try to get guys who live in double-wide trailers in Sacramento to build full-scale humanoid robots. But all of these things have sort of happened mostly because all we're trying to do is get people to commingle and collaborate and come and have a really fun time and ideally become rock stars. And it's one of my favorite things is when I actually see the builders going, oh, I gotta do another autograph session, and it's like, well, I'm really sorry that we turned you into rock stars, Matt, but that's just the way it is. And I think I tried to keep it right at 15 minutes of that. Okay, so thank you very much. And for the teachers in the room, actually, we're having another event for the locals in San Mateo, December 19th and 20th. And we always let school groups in for free so long as we know in advance that they're coming and don't show up the day of. So feel free to contact me anytime today, and we can arrange for free school trips for any of the teachers to come.
Let's give David another round of applause.